Of all Pamela's 4 children, only her one son has an English degree like her. Like her, he loves words and language and people, and he is very funny in a quaint, dry kind of way. One day, as a very young teenager, he said, "I like the idea of the sort of person who would say, 'Best be going now.'" Now, as Pamela has said in her blog on hot cross buns, she is only to hear one note and sound, and she is likely to recall a song from way, way back. So the quotation of that saying immediately brought another saying to her: "Roll on tomorrow." Like her son, she imagined the kind of person who would say that. She saw a woman, and next her son. Then some more sayings tapped themselves off her computer keys. Very quickly appeared the kind of people they were and their relationship. And because she'd already got hold of the start of a thread of sayings, more followed, fast and furious. She says she doesn't know whether the sayings wrote the story or the story brought in more sayings. But here it is. Roll on tomorrow. Roll on tomorrow. That's what my old mum used to say. Roll on tomorrow. For tomorrow she was going to win the pools and be done with all this working her fingers to the bone to keep our bodies and souls together. Yes, tomorrow she was going to give up charring and retire to a little place in the country. A little piece of heaven. But for today it was all sighs and grunts as she came in from a hard day's cleaning. Then, "Well, that's life," she would smile at me, and without a moment to rest her weary bones, she got straight down to pummeling dough. It always seemed to be pastry in those days, puddings, pies, or dumplings. Something to line your stomach with, lad. For she was a great one for warmth, you see, my mum. Like porridge and bacon when you were already late for school, and "Got your vest on? Take another woolly, a muffler," when the last thing you wanted was to look like a parcel. I ask you, she started on like that when I had my first date. There I was, ready and raring to go, in an open-neck shirt and jacket, trying to look like the kind of chap who'd just stepped out of a car. But Mum knew I had to walk to the other end of town for the dance, and I could almost see the dreaded balaclava glint in her eye. I would have to sneak out of the back door quick. And as my practised hand closed it without a sound, I could hear her death of cold mutterings. I ran, both to escape and because it really was deathly cold. Better to be red and panting than to have chattering teeth. After all, it could be mistaken for ardour. Nervous, but desperate, I was overjoyed when my date said I could take her home. She had a widowed mother who always went to bed early on Saturdays. If she was anything like my mum, I thought, as the girl tiptoed me in, she should be well away by now, dreaming of winning the pools. So there we were, the sofa, the 40-watt light, and the girl. I was made, wasn't I? I couldn't believe it. I took her in my arms and kissed her. It was my first real kiss, but she wasn't to know that, was she? But I wasn't getting any resistance, and I couldn't believe that either. I let my hand spy out the land. A bit of smooth talking, caressing, hiding the fact that I was trying to get inside her jumper. I'd always been led to believe that you just slid your hand down the front or up the back, but this was tucked firmly inside an unwieldy waistband. So I gave up the pretence of twiddling her hair and stroking her neck and blatantly attacked the row of fiddly buttons. I undid one, I undid the next, but then the material rasped on a jagged hangnail which I'd been secretly gnawing at all week in thinking of this night. One half of the buttonhole loop came away, leaving a thread still twisted round. There were still 6 to go, and I was almost going off the whole idea. Don't forget, on top of the button obstacle I had a few others to get over, like guilt. A terrible vision was floating before the eyes of my mother's largest gold-rimmed tract. "Thy sin shall find thee out." But funnily enough, it wasn't that finished me. No, I wasn't going to let these words put me off. I closed my eyes to them and began pulling the jumper up. And that was what did it, finding nothing beneath that jumper but flesh. No petticoat, never mind vest or liberty bodice. My mother had had my much older sister to button up once, you see, liberty bodice and all. So it was that which put the tin hat on it, as my mother would say, keeping warm. Worse than the tract or any of Mother's warnings was the vision of the girl on the sofa, naked, while I would have to peel off jacket, cardigan, shirt and vest, waiting. She would freeze to death. So that was the end of it, and there wasn't much fun after that. I'd lost confidence, and what with the clothes and the endless warnings, tracts everywhere about paying for one's folly, undisguised hints about simple pleasures being best. But she passed on in the Lord's time, my mum, to the simple pleasures and total purity of her little piece of heaven. I remember it was Friday the 13th, and the rooks had flown to our roof the day before. But you couldn't fool me. I'd swear she hung on through Thursday the 12th on purpose. And I still resent her look of "I told you so" and her last words on living a clean life and airing my clothes before she sank contentedly into her tomorrow, where, no doubt, the clouds were dumpling-shaped. The funny thing was, though, it still seemed she was there. I don't just mean the buxom photo on the sideboard or the gold-rimmed text. I knew I could expect my death of thunderbolts if I dared move those. No, it was more that everywhere I went, well, I suppose I felt her looking over my shoulder. So there still wasn't much chance of any fun, really. I took to going for a drink in the evenings, but I could never get to know anyone more warmly by bringing them back. I had no inducement, see, since I could not defile Mum's hearth and home with the devil's brew. Why didn't I move to a bachelor flat? Well, I suppose Mum's place was convenient, a compact 2 up, 2 down, which had been all Mum could afford to rent after Dad died and my sister got married, and it was all I could afford on my own. But it wasn't just that. To have dismantled her kitchen, thrown out her washtub, would have been to have destroyed her in a way death never could. I told you, she was still there. And she won in the end. There I was, a reasonable wage, a long way from my teens, and in times much changed from that first Romeo bungle. It was high time I became a man, and I had a date with a girl I'd met at a party. A sophisticated piece who would teach me a thing or two, I hoped. I got ready, slowly, savouring the thoughts of the evening ahead. It was now or never. I had to break loose and not let Mum spoil anything. I was a big boy now, I told the staunch photograph, and took off the offending vest. Nor did I bother to change my socks and toss back into his drawer the clean hanky I'd been trained to take with me. Vanity, vanity, her pursed lips seemed to admonish me as I lacquered my wayward hair. The be prepared Boy Scout code hammered in my head as I saw that there was not time to check the car. And a flurry of texts like "look before you leap" and "marry in haste and repent at leisure" whirled everywhere like soap flakes as I dashed from the house in a torment of guilt and anticipation. I hoped my new jacket looked good. It ought to. I'd spent enough on it. Not to mention my whole lunch hour choosing it. I could hear my mother's forebodings echoed in the gnawing of my stomach, for the jacket hunt had not even left time for a sandwich. Moreover, my feckless lack of foresight had earned me an empty larder at home. I still winced like a naughty boy, remembering Mother's views on those who put it all on their backs and not in their bellies. Still, I was taking the girl to eat, wasn't I? I had visions of steak and avocados over candles, drinking in wine and music and mounting passion, leading up to taking her home. The first thing that went wrong was that she chose a noisy place with picky food, nothing you could get your teeth into. Not that I could have sat there scoffing anyway, with her just nibbling and playing with her food and wanting to dance all the time. The gnawing in my stomach was becoming a rumble, muffled by the drums, since we'd been placed right next to the band. An outsized satin-bottom bebop by my ear, and I let myself be distracted from the food. The devil certainly comes in strange shapes. I'd get coffee at her place, wouldn't I? It wasn't difficult to lure her into my car either, but the trouble was that although she told me she had her own place, she hadn't told me where. Halfway there and another 6 miles to go, my passion was melting with the rain on the windscreen and the pain in my stomach. Then the car packed up. I scarcely knew where I was, and by now it was pouring. I got out to look for help and found myself cursing the lane we were in, which a moment ago I'd been blessing as romantic. It was not only unlit, but muddy. By the time I got back, the girl was huddled in the car, looking disgruntled and sniffing in her low-neck dress. I'd thrown away all the old cushions and rugs my mother had always said I should keep in a car. "They're sending someone," I said, trying to recover the atmosphere as I put my wet sleeve round her shivering shoulders. And as she sniffed again, I put my hand gallantly into my pocket to pull out no clean hanky. Still, I wouldn't give up hope. Back at her place, she would have to change out of that dress, wouldn't she, into one of those negligee things. Perhaps it was all for the good after all. And in half an hour I had indeed forgotten my bad beginnings, for there she was, in toweling bathrobe, unbuttoning my shirt. I pulled her down onto the sofa, bouncing boyishly and putting my feet up, till I caught sight of my gaping shoes. I'd been too busy buying the jacket to remember the stitch in time of the shoe menders, and now the rain had finished them off. I kicked them off light-heartedly, only to reveal my unchanged socks, wet and holy. Surely passion would carry us through. She ruffled my hair, and her long nails caught in my stiff plasticky locks. I pulled her hand away, kissing her fingertips. My stomach let out a rumble, so I kissed round her ears and hoped she would think it was her soft background music. This was it then. She took off my shirt, and I wished I'd kept my vest on, facing, as I'd never done before, my thin chest and slight paunch. Hoping to look like the Romeo of her dreams, I flexed my muscles, pulled in my stomach, and my trousers fell down. Feeling like somebody in a farce, I refused to give up. After all, she might think it was meant. The trousers. I lunged forward towards her, clinging desperately to what looked like being my first and last night. "Cast ne'er a clout till May be out," my mum's voice echoed in the room, as I put the final mockers on my chances with the loudest ever elephant trumpet sneeze. Well, that was that. Except to say that faint heart never won fair lady. So I won't say die. What I must do now is get a flat. I looked at Mum's photograph and she seemed to wink at me. "Of course I'll take you with me," I told her. But not the texts, I thought. But you know, a really swish place to take the girls. Somewhere I dare take the booze to get them in the mood. Keep a stock of jumpers and hankies. Buy a brand new car that won't break down. All I've got to do now is win the pools. Roll on tomorrow.